Hello, and welcome to the Sex Within Marriage podcast. My name is JD, and I blog over at uncoveringintimacy.com. And today I have a question that I got from my anonymous Have a Question page that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on. So I pulled it out of the regular set of questions, and we're going to discuss it today. And, I'll just read the question. This wife writes, "Hi, Jay. I have a question for you / your podcast. So my husband and I have been married for about 8 months now. It seems like every time he gives me oral sex, I end up orgasming within a few minutes. Now, as great as orgasming is, I feel like after I orgasm so quickly, I am not as stimulated by penetration. Also, I really enjoy oral sex and I wish the experience could last longer. My husband and I waited until marriage to have sex, but before I was following Christ and before I met my husband, I was sexually active, including oral sex, and this has never happened. So my questions are, 1, is this normal? Is premature ejaculation a thing in women? Number 2, are there any ways to fix this and or last longer? And 3, in women, if you orgasm once, is there a come down period? How is it possible to have multiple orgasms in one sex section? Sorry for all the questions. I feel like we are so new to having sex and we have a lot to learn. I appreciate any and all input. Thanks." So, first off, I'm thrilled you found a place to ask them. Too many people never feel safe enough to ask these questions anywhere, and so they just keep wondering. So let's start right off the bat with saying it is 100% normal to experience more stimulation from oral sex than penetrative sex. So let's talk about penetrative sex for a moment first. So the standard estimate is that about 30% of women orgasm from penetrative sex alone. Some believe this is due to physiology. The most common rationale is that the clitoris is too far from the vaginal canal, so it doesn't get stimulated enough during penetration. This belief is attributed to Napoleon's niece, Marie Bonaparte, who was obsessed with the idea of learning how to orgasm from penetration because, well, she couldn't. She actually measured the distance between the clitoris and the vaginal canal in 243 women and quizzed them about their ability to orgasm. She also engaged in quite a few affairs to see if it was her husband's fault, basically. She published her study under a male pseudonym in 1924, which is how all this came to be known. She called it her study on female frigidity. And then she actually underwent surgery in 1927 to have her clitoris moved in an effort to learn to orgasm from sex. But it didn't work, and ultimately her work was dismissed by gynecologists who found many examples of women who could orgasm despite having a larger distance between their clitoris and vaginal opening. So it didn't seem to be a rule. But there could be something physiological nevertheless, even if her specific theory was misplaced, or maybe the distance has an effect, but isn't the determining factor. Others believe it's pure psychology, that all women could learn to orgasm during sex, but many don't. Sigmund Freud, who Mary Bonaparte actually consulted with on the topic, believed that women who couldn't orgasm from penetration were psychologically immature. And that sounds pretty condescending, and it has been since largely dismissed. But in all honesty, I wonder if he was on to something. Unfortunately, the phrasing makes you want to reject the idea immediately, but what if we use the term like penetratively pre-orgasmic instead, implying that one could learn but simply hadn't yet? And I believe both of these beliefs probably have some truth to them, but many people don't leverage the fact that you can use both methods, physiology and psychology, to achieve orgasm. The human body is capable of having orgasms through physical stimulation or mental stimulation, but it finds it much easier when you have both. A rather disturbing example is that people can orgasm while being sexually assaulted, which is certainly not a pleasant or mentally arousing experience for most. But if there's enough physical stimulation, it can happen. And one could argue that it's still a sexual context, even if it's unwanted, and so there might be some psychological aspect to it. However, some women also experience orgasms while working out, known as corgasms. In those cases, there's no sexual context whatsoever, so physical stimulation can be enough to get someone to orgasm without any mental stimulation whatsoever. Similarly, people can orgasm from mental stimulation alone. Teenage boys orgasm in their sleep without any stimulation, and some women do as well, although that's less talked about. Also, some men and women can have orgasms simply by thinking about it, or being led to an aroused state by someone else simply through text or voice. So some women can orgasm from penetration alone and nothing else, but I hear quite a few women shocked to find that they can orgasm from penetration after they've tried some new activity in the bedroom because the mental arousal, in addition to the physical stimulation, is enough to push them over the edge. Similarly, women who enter a new relationship are sometimes surprised to find that they can orgasm from sex in that one, but not the prior one. And some then go on to be orgasmic during sex in later relationships, suggesting that it can be learned. And some don't, suggesting that it's also contextual or psychological. Now, can every woman learn to do that? I have a hypothesis that they could, but I don't think everyone will for various reasons, such as beliefs that they can't, hang-ups about sex, problems in their relationship, lacking enough stimulation, either physical or mental, or a combination, medications, general health, and who knows what else. And there are a bunch of other tricks to orgasming during sex as well, some of which I detail in the post, how to make it easier to orgasm during sex, which I'll link to in the show notes, and I have more tips in my ebook called Making It Easier to Orgasm, a guide for Christian wives. And I just read a study from back in 2017 saying that women who take an 8-week mindfulness course increase their orgasm ability by 30%, which I think adds to my argument that mental arousal and focus can aid in learning to orgasm. I've had quite a few wives that they say they can't believe the difference that, for example, talking dirty in bed made for their ability to orgasm. So there's some ideas about why penetrative sex can be difficult to have an orgasm from, as well as some tips to kind of try to get there. On the other hand, oral sex is stereotypically considered the go-to method of having an orgasm for women, arguably men too, but that's a different discussion. Of course, it's a stereotype and people are individuals, and many women can't orgasm from oral sex, and some don't feel much of anything from it, and some can't stand it, either due to the sensations or their own beliefs, hang-ups, fears, or whatever else. But for a lot of women, about 81%, according to our oral sex survey that we did a few years ago, it works really well. The tongue is softer than two pubic bones grinding up against each other. It's also more direct stimulation and more targeted. You can direct the sensations, up, down, side to side, circles, licking, dragging, sucking. There are a lot of options with a mouse that you don't get during penetrative sex. Sort of like if you want to move a car, it's a lot easier to get in the driver's seat and drive it exactly where you want it than to try to ram it with another vehicle and hope it falls into place. Plus, oral sex can be one-sided. You can just lie there and enjoy it and not have to worry about reciprocating. And for a lot of women, this is a bonus because they can focus on the sensations rather than focusing on trying to make their husbands feel good at the same time. On the other hand, for some, that's a problem because they get performance anxiety, body image anxiety. They worry about the taste, smell, texture, and a bunch of other things. As a side note, for those women, most men love the taste, smell, texture, their wife's body, and all the other things. Also, oral sex can easily be combined with other types of stimulation, such as manual stimulation using your fingers, nipple stimulation, and anal play. Talking dirty is a bit harder, though, at least for the one performing oral sex. If you're the receiver, go for it. And lastly, for some, oral sex is still a bit taboo, which makes it more exciting, which boosts your mental arousal. So, in short, it's not only normal to orgasm easier from oral sex than penetrative sex, it's so normal that there is a false assumption that this holds true for all women. So, that handles why oral sex might work better than penetrative sex for you. But what about orgasming before you want to? And that's really the question here, I think. It doesn't matter if it takes you 20 seconds or 20 minutes. If you orgasm before you want to and can't stop it, then that can be frustrating. And the University of Chicago's 2005 National Health and Social Life Survey found that about 10% of women orgasm before they would like to. And another study I found showed that 40% of women have experienced this at some point in their lives, yet we rarely ever hear or talk about this. Now, it could be because women don't have a refractory period like men, that come down period that you asked about. They don't have an erection to lose. And for many women, sex after an orgasm gets better. Some don't even want foreplay to be done until they've had 1 or 2 or 5. If you can have multiple orgasms, then why wouldn't you want to have a quick one and then another and as many as you can get, right? But for some, after an orgasm, they're too sensitive to keep going. For others, their desire for sex completely disappears after an orgasm, and for some, they just want to sleep afterwards. For those women, having an orgasm too soon can be a bit of a letdown. And yeah, it can feel very similar to premature ejaculation in men. As well, most people, men and women, find that the longer that you can delay an orgasm, the more pleasurable and strong it is. So when you have a quick one without much of a build-up, without being as aroused as you could be, it can feel like you got something mediocre and are missing out on what could have been really amazing. So, in short, yeah, it happens to a lot of women. Maybe not the majority, but 10% isn't a small number. If you have 50 couples in your church, 5 of those wives might experience this on a regular basis. I also wanted to mention that it's completely normal as well that you have never experienced this with your previous partners. Arousal is very context dependent. So different times, places, partners, mindsets, moods, etc. can change things a lot. As well, where you are in your cycle, where you are in life, your hormone levels, which can change both with your cycle and as you age, general health, stress, meds, water intake, exercise, and on can change how things feel. In short, it's not weird at all that this has only happened in this relationship. That can really mess with some people, which is one of the reasons I think sex was intended to only be experienced within marriage. It's hard enough when things can shift with the same partner, but when you add different ones, that can lead to some hurt feelings. And I don't say this to admonish you for your past, but rather to hopefully warn others who are trying to make these types of decisions. So, how can women delay their orgasm and last longer? The advice for women who experience premature orgasm is pretty similar to men, except you have a few more options owing to the fact that you don't have an erection, or rather a lack thereof, to worry about. The easiest is simply to take a break for a bit, focus on him, which is harder if you're the pass out after an orgasm type, and then go for round 2 when you're ready. For some, simply putting their hand over the clitoris is enough to dampen the stimulation enough that penetrative sex still feels good and might eventually get you to orgasm again, or at least give you time to become less sensitive. In cases that are really distressing, like if you orgasmed within seconds every single time, there are some doctors who will prescribe SSRIs as they might have a side effect of delaying orgasm. But for most people, to me, that seems a bit like running a car in your living room to try to warm the house up. It might work, but it might have some unintended consequences. I'm not really a big fan of taking meds if there are other options. What I'd probably try is edging. Now, this wife has only been married for 8 months, so this might take some practice, as I think this gets easier the longer that you're married and the more experience you have with your partner. So get your husband first to bring you to the brink of orgasm, then back off and do something that won't push you over the edge for a bit, and then let your arousal drop a bit, but not completely disappear. Then start up again and repeat as many times as you want. Some women actually use this method to learn how to orgasm from penetrative sex. So you could do oral sex until you're just about ready to orgasm, or as close as you can manage, then switch to sex until you think you can handle more, then back to oral, then just keep going back and forth until you're ready to orgasm. This practice of edging takes, practice. You have to be aware of how close to orgasm you are, and you can get more skilled at holding off orgasm for short periods, eventually working up to holding yourself on the brink for a while until you're ready to go over. As well, communicating where you are to your spouse takes some practice. He in turn has to watch your body language, listen to the sounds you're making, and hopefully eventually learn to keep you riding that edge without needing direct verbal feedback. It might also help if your husband can change up his technique a bit. Maybe find something that isn't as intense for you, but is still pleasurable. Without knowing exactly what he's doing, I'd generically suggest less pressure, less speed, and less focus on the clitoris. That way, he could slow down the buildup more as well, which could lead to a bigger orgasm that doesn't happen as quickly. Now, to answer the question, is there a come down period for women? In the vast majority of men, after ejaculation follows a refractory period. The current theory is that prolactin is released, which causes a physiological inability to get an erection again. For some, that inability lasts minutes. For others, it's hours. And for some, it can even be days. However, women have no such physiological system that causes a similar reaction. Plus, you don't have an erection to worry about. However, both men and women could also experience a sort of psychological refractory period wherein they're not terribly interested in having sex again. So while it's not physically impossible for you to experience another orgasm due to already having one, you may find yourself not really looking to have another. But since you're asking questions about being multi-orgasmic, I'm going to assume that you are. So can you become multi-orgasmic? The data suggests that you probably can. I saw one small study that showed that 39% of female health professionals have multiple orgasms compared to with the standard number of about 15% of women in the general public. The hypothesis was that the extra knowledge of biology and anatomy aided in learning how to be multi-orgasmic. But whatever the specific reason, the implication is clear. It's definitely a learned skill, at least for some. Assuming you aren't too sensitive, uncomfortable, passed out, or otherwise disinclined to continue, one option is just simply keep going during sex. Even if you feel no desire to, you may find that you can get aroused again if you're willing to be. My regular readers and listeners may recognize this as similar to responsive desire. Most women who learn to become multi-orgasmic do so simply by, well, not stopping. Some may need a few seconds, maybe 15 or 30, or even a minute or two, but then start up stimulation again. And the standard advice for learning to become multi-orgasmic for women is, number one, get aroused. Number two, edge for a while. You get close to orgasm, then back off and calm down for a few minutes, then start up again, and just keep doing that a few times. Then have an orgasm, and then you start stimulation again as soon as it feels good. And then you just keep going with that. And that's it. Now, my wife and I have yet to try this method, so I can't promise it works. I'm only relaying what is the standard protocol for learning that everyone seems to think this is how you do it. And you may have to make some adjustments to the stimulation that's occurring between the first and subsequent orgasms. For example, many women find that while a buzzy vibrator might be great for the first orgasm, it can be really annoying to try and start up again with, but a toy that's more rumbly works pretty well. And as a side note, the best toy I know that has that kind of rumbly type feel rather than a buzzy feel is the Lehman by Mina. And they just happen to have sent me a coupon code for $50 off one of them. So if you're interested in checking that out, I'll link to the toy in the show notes, and you can use the coupon code UI Black Friday to get the discount. I'll put that in the show notes too. Anyways, if you achieve your first orgasm through oral sex, your husband might have to switch up on his technique a bit for the second orgasm, at least to start. Maybe less direct stimulation, not as hard or fast, or whatever he does that causes you to orgasm so quickly. And that might be hard for him because, guys, when we find something that really works to get an orgasm, we have a tendency to just, hit that orgasm button as hard and as fast as we can because we think orgasms are amazing, and why wouldn't you want to orgasm more and faster? So he might have to learn to back off and let you build up a bit. So in summary, you're not weird. And yes, it's perfectly normal, even if it isn't average. Many women orgasm before they wish to because they want to extend sex or build to a bigger orgasm. So change things up a bit, take some breaks, learn to build more control, and find activities that will help you keep in an aroused state longer without pushing you over the edge. Or better yet, learn to ride that edge for as long as you can. Or you can just try to learn to have multiple orgasms and then not worry about orgasming too fast and just enjoy all the ones you can or want. Just don't make learning to be multi-orgasmic a crusade that takes over sex. Maybe set aside particular sessions to work towards that goal, and other times just for enjoying the intimacy of sex. Because sex that feels like work has a tendency to become unsexy very quickly. I think that's all of my thoughts on this for now. If you have follow-up questions, you can email me, you can comment on the blog post below. If you are a listener and you have ideas for what could help, stick them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you have a question, you feel free to go over to our Have a Question page and submit it there. Every month I round up all the questions and answer them all, usually in one big blog post, but every once in a while I'll pick one out that will take a little bit more time to answer, and I wanted to go into more detail, like this one. And lastly, Christmas is coming up. If you are interested in grabbing our Intimacy Advent Calendar, it's available now just for the Christmas season. And if you want to get it free, check out our support page as our $5 and more a month supporters get it for free. And that's it for now. Talk to you next time.